Hey, well, welcome everybody. It is the latest episode of What's Up, Know, Learn, Fly. Uh, Today's episode being Under the Hood, revealing the mysteries of instrument flying. So hopefully we're going to find something that's going to interest you today and help you out. And of course, towards the end, we will answer your questions. Let me go ahead and click here really quick. But as always, before we begin, let's do a little bit of that housekeeping just to make sure everyone knows how the system operates. We have our attendee control panel. And so if you are using a computer, you're going to look at like what's over here on the right-hand side of the screen. So if you'd like to ask a question, which we would love to have you do, you're looking for that little, looks like a cartoon bubble with the question mark in it, and that will pop open the little menu at the bottom. Make sure you type in your question, and most importantly, click that send button so that we see it. If you are using a tablet, iPad, or some kind of an Android device or whatever it may be, you're looking something like this. You're looking for that little question mark right there. You'll tap on that, and then you want to type a question in again, and then don't forget, again, click that send button so that we see it. My name, as always, is Chris Moser. I am the Senior Director of Flight Training Education here at AOPA. And just for today's purposes, because normally I just say that I'm a teacher and a flight instructor, but in this case too, I actually am an instrument instructor as well. So hopefully makes it appropriate for talking to you guys today about instrument stuff. I work here at AOPA doing things to support CFIs in schools. And unfortunately, Dan Justman couldn't be with us today. He is busy working on a project with our high schools program. So today, kind of filling in for Dan, say hello, Stephen.
Hello, Stephen.
And go ahead, Stephen.
All
Of
right,
course,
and I'm here.
introduce
Here we
yourself.
go. I'm in. I'm here. I'm in. Okay.
There we go. There it is. Look at
Uh-huh.
that.
So, coordinator of Flight Training Initiative. I do work with Chris directly on a variety of projects throughout the year. Our big one's the Flight Training Experience Awards and producing this webinar series. So, I'll be happy helping out and being a little more verbal today for things. Try to fill in for Dan as best I can.
Yes, so exactly. So Stephen will be kind of filling in for Dan in terms of helping with your questions. And lurking in the background, we have another one of our team members, Chris Horvath. You want to say hello real fast, Chris?
Hello, real fast, Chris.
And there it is. So Chris will be helping with some of the technical questions that you may have. All right, let's keep it moving. Don't forget today's broadcast of What's Up, Know, Learn, Fly is brought to you by the AOPA Foundation and donations therein. So please, if you are so interested in supporting the program and all the other things like the Air Safety Institute and everything else that the AOPA Foundation supports, check it out at aopafoundation.org. We would love to have your support there to help us out and keep everything moving. All right, reminders today. Wings credit. Yes, if you are viewing the live broadcast right now, that means today here, March 20th, 2025 at 12 Eastern. If you're viewing this live, then you are eligible for Wings credit. So what you want to do is everything's good to go as long as you've registered or as long as you have subscribed to our program through the GoToWebinar software. It's like, so if you've been a longtime subscriber, that's awesome and thank you. As long as you use your FAAsafety.gov email address, you are good to go. If you're not sure, I know Stephen or Chris will post this in the chat in the questions. That link right there, there's a little link. You can fill out that form if you just want to double check. But otherwise, if you've always been getting Wings credit, nothing has changed. You'll keep getting Wings credit for attending today. So no worries. Any other non-Wings related questions, please feel free to contact us at ftinitiative@aopa.org. The big thing is that link helps out Stephen when it comes to going through them. It just keeps everything organized in a quick fashion for him to check those that need to be checked. The other most common question that we get on the show is this being recorded? And of course it is. We are recording this and it will show up on AOPA's YouTube channel in a couple of days. So it'll probably be early next week by the time it gets posted. So you can check it out, AOPA pilot video. And then under AOPA pilot video, you'll see a bunch of different playlists, or I think it's playlist it says under there. And you just open those up and you'll find one that says, What's Up, Know, Learn, Fly. And you can find it there, or you can also just go to webinars.aopa.org, as you can see there, and then listed there is that What's Up, Know, Learn, Fly link. That'll take you to all of our posted recorded shows. All right, Stephen, want to tell us a little bit about what happened this day in history?
I thought it was appropriate, so it was more like this week, but I was looking for something that was interesting. James L. Kinney made the first blind, meaning fully instrumented, landing in a flight through mostly fog, traveling from College Park, Maryland to Newark. It was hard to find photos of him. There was lots of articles about it, but I'm not actually 100% certain this man in the picture is actually him. But this
I
is the
thought you were
picture
going
that
to say
kept
it's hard
coming
to
up
find
with it.
photos of him flying in the clouds. So like, where is he? Anyway,
Right, I think that's probably why. It's very foggy, and they
could
couldn't
be.
couldn't catch up. Like, yeah,
Exactly. Okay,
IFR.
cool. Yeah, exactly. IFR. All right, we haven't done a poll in a while, so we're going to do a poll today just to find out where everybody in the audience, kind of where you are in your instrument journey. So if you would, roll the poll for us, Stephen, so we can find out where everybody is. So today's question is, where are you in your instrument rating journey? Maybe you're just coming on today, you're just kind of curious about what's this instrument rating thing all about, or maybe it's that you're in training, you're working on it. I know I just saw somebody, I believe it was Roger early on, mentioned that he had done some Rusty Pilots work with us, and then is now just about to take his instrument check ride. So it could be that you're in your instrument training and just working that way. Maybe you've got your instrument rating, but you're still learning. I know for me, I'm always still learning. And then D, maybe flying in the clouds is my home away from home. Like I'm an expert, I'm an old hand, and I've done this plenty. And then finally, of course, I always like to put my dumb joke one in there on these polls. I thought this webinar was about improving my tuba solos, which we can do one on that if you're really interested. Although, can you play tuba, Stephen? I can't, but we could probably find an app that would.
I am not that kind of instrument rated.
So I'm looking at the audience breakdown. We're about 75%. Looking for, let's see if we can get it up to about 80% there. Just let you folks answer. Oh, and while we're waiting on this too, Stephen, what's the tip for it? Because sometimes the poll can stay in the way. What's the deal with that?
Oh, right. So depending on your device, I've gotten some mixed answers from the FAQs through GoTo's interface, but sometimes it opens a second tab on top of the visual, so you have to close the window that has the poll. Other devices, it moves over to the side, so you have to swipe back to get back to the visual once the poll is done. So it kind of
So it could
depends.
be a new tab or a new window that popped up, and you just need to
Right.
remove that once
Right.
we're done.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And if you accidentally drop out and come back in, that's fine. You won't lose credit. You might miss a couple minutes of conversation, but that's a possibility. So just be wary.
Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and show the results of the poll here. I'm looking. It looks like the about 40% almost of our audience has their instrument rating, but they're still learning, which is always good because it's always a lot to learn with that. And we have got about 29% just curious. So that's a pretty good mix of folks then, and then 25%. So actually a little more than half curious about it and or working on that instrument rating, and then just under that 40% of folks that have their instrument rating, which I know for me was a really cool one to get, and I really enjoy the instrument flying. And then we have about 6% of the audience there flying through the clouds, old hands, and then of course all my friends there that like my dumb jokes about the tuba thing. So I appreciate you guys clicking on that one. All right. Okay. So let's go ahead and go to the next bit. Let's give an idea of what we're going to talk about. Now, I'm going to admit I overplanned on this one because there was and I just picked out things I thought, well, I want to do a little overview for folks that don't have an instrument rating to give them a little bit about it. I also wanted to try to give some of the tips that I have found, whether it was when back in the days when I was flying freight and did a lot of instrument flying, and then also through instruction. So just some of the things. So these are the things I picked out. We're going to do our best to knock these out. If for some reason I run out of time on some of them, then I will save it for a future episode and we'll go into more. So we'll find out more of what you guys like. So just let me know in the comments things you like. So here's the basic thing. We're going to do a really, really quick instrument flying overview, just what it's about, very broad overview of what it takes to get it. We're going to talk about the scan. And knowing that we've got a lot of folks that already have their instrument rating and they're working on it. So I'm going to just talk in general about the scan. Don't worry for people that are new to instrument flying or just curious when it comes to the scan. When I talk about that, you are going to learn that. You're going to spend a lot of time. But specifically, I wanted to talk about one that I learned not that long ago that I really fully came to understand. That's the one I want to share with you as kind of a pro tip. And then IFR charts overview. We've done this in the past as well. There is a handout, I believe. Yep. And on that, there was a past episode that we did about instrument flying, using it for VFR flying at night. So I did a more in-depth thing there. So I put the link to that episode on the handout in case you want to go back and check that out. But I'll just kind of do an overview because I know that for me, when I was going through my instrument rating, the thing that was a mystery, especially before that, was approach charts. So we're going to talk about just charts in general. But these are the pro tips, and I'm hoping this will help everybody, is that my pro tips on VOR orientation, because I have definitely noticed that people don't seem to know VORs quite as well as they used to, especially folks coming up through training now because of the prevalence of GPS. So I'm gonna take a little more of a deep dive into that. And then some holding procedure tips as well, because that always seems to be something that's a challenge for folks. And then if we have time, we'll do some en route tips. So that's kind of the rundown. Let's get to it.
All right.
All right, first of all, instrument flying overview. Any questions, Stephen, by the way, that we want to pop in before I move on here?
Not so far, just checking.
Okay, cool. So instrument flying overview. So of course, what is instrument flying for folks that are new to it or just curious about it? Well, that's the idea that we would go fly in the clouds using obviously only our flight instruments, because when we're in the clouds, we can't see outside sort of by definition when you're in actual instrument conditions. And so we control the airplane using those flight instruments. And of course, I will talk about that scan in just a moment. And the other part is we're navigating using predetermined courses or navigation aids or nav aids. And that's where we're using GPS. VOR is our backup system. I guess in really rare instances, maybe there's still some NDBs out there, but I think a lot of those have been decommissioned. But it's just basically using that electronic navigation that we have available to us. So that's just a super broad overview of that part. What are the rating basics? How do you get it? Well, of course, the privileges are the fact you can fly in weather below VFR conditions and flying on an instrument flight rules clearance. So the cool thing about it is that you don't have to fly in instrument conditions to use that instrument clearance. It does give you priority when it comes to traffic in terms of separation and in sometimes getting into busier airports. So it can be very useful just for that, which is why a lot of the professional pilots, like when I was flying freight, we were pretty much always on an IFR clearance, especially coming back for where I was based, Phoenix Sky Harbor. So it was helpful for that. Basic requirements to get it. And by the way, these are not by any means the full details, but just a broad overview. You need a private pilot certificate. You need, and of course, the same category and class and type of aircraft that you're going to have your private in. It's what you would be getting your instrument in. So like helicopter or airplane, that sort of thing. 50 hours of cross-country time. There's a little more of a breakdown of what that is. 40 hours of actual or simulated instrument time, and then 15 hours of instrument training from an approved instructor. That means someone who is a flight instructor with an instrument rating on their flight instructor certificate. So if you'd like more details about that, see 14 CFR 6165 for full details. The one thing that's cool about the instrument rating is you can use a simulator to do a lot of that training, or actually you can do more than you could in other ratings. So like your typical ATD or advanced training device, you can get like 10 hours you can use for the instrument rating. If you somehow had access to like one of those really full major simulators, you can do a lot of it in there, if not close to all of it. So that's the basics there. Check out 14 CFR 6165 if you want to get full details on that. Let's get into the content though. All right. So again, broad overview for folks that are new to the instrument rating or the idea of it. And then I'm going to talk about a special scan here in just a moment that I'm hoping is useful to everybody, except for maybe my old hands. Maybe they know this already. So the instrument scan, basically what we're doing is we learn, and this is just a analog, what we call the steam gauges a lot of times, because it kind of looks like that. These old time radio gauges, old time. My gosh, I'm dating myself. This is what I learned on. And so what you do is basically you typically start at the attitude indicator right here in the middle, and then you can see the little arrows. This picture is just out of the instrument flying handbook from the FAA, and you kind of go from here and you develop a scan depending on what maneuver you're doing. Always notice though, coming back to this hub of the attitude indicator. And so depending on what I'm doing, I would be monitoring my airspeed, my altitude, and so on. So what you learn is one of the things you train doing your instrument rating is just this basics of basic attitude instrument flying, of how to control the airplane and where to look efficiently. Because what can happen is it's very easy for people and common for people to fixate. They're focusing on altitude, and then while they're doing that, they don't realize that they're starting to turn. So we learn how to discipline where we are looking so that we can really focus in and get the full information. Yes, and I will talk about it. So you see some of the questions in there. I'm going to talk about glass cockpit just briefly here in a second. Go ahead, Stephen.
Oh, just someone had mentioned too, what is the minimum equipment required for IFR? Like, is there a minimum set of stuff you're supposed to have?
So the airplane would be certified. I could not name them all at the top of my head, but the basics are you need to have obviously flight instruments of this basic variety, either this, or I'll show you a glass cockpit in a minute, what that looks like. You need to have a source of navigation. And then it's like whether GPS, and it has to be an IFR certified GPS. And usually I'm not sure the VOR is absolutely required. It is our official backup. So the airplane would go through that process of getting certified for IFR and having the appropriate equipment. So like I said, I'd have to dig up that reg to find out the basics of the certification part of what will be required. But an airplane, like when you go to rent one or to purchase one or whatever, it would say whether or not it was IFR certified. So you need radios, a compass, things like that, source of electrical energy, and so on. So there is a full list of that.
Okay.
All right, so let's take a look. This is the one that I wanted to share, though. So this one for me, I had always heard about it during my instrument rating. So even for my folks out there that have their instrument ratings, I had learned about this during my training, my instrument training. But this is the one that once later on, me getting back into instrument flying, after years, and I think I read an AOPA article, which I have in the handout. It's by Ralph Butcher, and he talked about using this inverted V scan. And I remember, like, kind of even as I was instructing people, I'd hear about it, but I didn't really grasp the full power of it. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about this one, but this, once I started to use it, is amazing. Yeah, I see you there, Adam, with grab card, and we could go through the grab card stuff, but that's we could go look up that reg too. If that's the grab card is the idea for the what's required on the airplane, but there's other stuff too to get it certified. So here is that inverted V scan. So basically what you do is you are doing a couple of things. Number one, you're looking at the attitude indicator. For me, I really like that attitude indicator because if anything starts to go awry, if you're wondering what is the condition of this airplane in terms of my control, the attitude indicator is by far the easiest thing to get a grasp on very quickly. So when things start to go haywire, immediately my eyes go back to the attitude indicator, and I'm trying to make sure, am I banked the way that I want to be banked, or am I level? And where's my pitch? Am I pitching up or down? So just for basic aircraft control, right to the attitude indicator. Normally what we would do, like on this previous slide, is that, maybe while I'm making changes, I want to check, okay, am I at the altitude that I want to be? Am I on the heading that I want to be? And I'm going to make those fine adjustments. Maybe while I'm turning, I'm checking, is my bank okay? How's my, it's like I'm checking my airspeed. Is that set where I want it? I may adjust that with power, or is it because I'm diving and climbing? But once I've made those changes and I've got myself to, like, I want to be at 3,000 feet, I want to be heading 270, the power of the inverted scan is amazing, because now that I'm set, I've got my altitude set where I want it, I've got my heading set where I want it, or maybe I'm turning and I've got my bank set where I want it. If you do this scan instead, you're getting two big advantages. Number one, you're getting the advantage of multiple checking systems if you're still flying an airplane that has things like a vacuum system. So depending on what my attitude indicator is powered by, maybe it's vacuum powered, it could be electric, right? So I'm checking this versus the other systems. So here I'm checking my vacuum system. My VSI is part of my static system. I'm hoping that everybody here on the audience here knows these systems without me having to go into that. So I'm just assuming basic knowledge of aircraft systems. And I'm cross-checking it against the electrical system with the turn coordinator. The cool part about this scan is that once I'm stabilized, like I said, whether I'm holding straight and level, maybe I'm climbing, like during even like an ILS type of thing where I'm just doing that 3-degree descent. By scanning these instruments, not only am I cross-checking those systems, but I am getting feedback from probably the most sensitive instruments. And I can remember back during my training of, like, being told, don't pay so much attention to the vertical speed indicator because it goes all over the place. Just scan the altimeter. Are you holding altitude? But what Ralph Butcher explains is that once you get these things where you want them, then monitor these two, because you will very quickly notice any changes in altitude on the VSI. It'll bump. And when I see it start to bump, then it cues me, oh, I'm starting to climb, back to the attitude indicator, and then I start scanning my altimeter. But if I can keep this, if I can make the changes where this stays still, my altimeter is not going to change. I'm going to be holding level. The same thing with a turn coordinator. It's like normally I would have focused on, like, trying to hold straight and level. I would have focused on the attitude indicator, my heading indicator, and my altimeter. But what'll happen is this will start to show any kind of change in, like, bank right? So to start to show me turning way before I might notice the heading indicator starting to turn. So that little bump here, if I'm scanning this and I see the wings off, immediately back to the attitude indicator, set it level, and then is the turn coordinator staying still? When you keep these under control, these never move. It's amazing how much more precise you can fly by scanning this inverted V once you've stabilized where it is you want to be. So I highly recommend try this. Go set straight and level, go set a standard rate turn, set a constant airspeed climb, and then monitor this inverted V once you've got it stabilized, and you will find that you are so much more precise. So I want to recommend this. This was amazing. And there's an article, like I said, in the handout by Ralph Butcher. It's one of the AOPA articles where he talks about this. And I please do apologize. Some of those articles are older, so the graphics in them are broken, and unfortunately, they're kind of lost to time. But you can definitely get it out of the text, even without the pictures that are provided. So that is one of my big pro secrets. That inverted V scan is amazing. For folks that are, with the electronic flight display, now again, I'm not going to go into the full explanation of how you would set up all your scans using an electronic flight display. For that, here it comes, Stephen. Here's the plug I always talk about. For that, I would check out things like Rod Machado's Instrument Pilot Handbook. Great book right here. I love it. He's got great pictures. He talks about it. And honestly, too, the FAA's Instrument Flying Handbook has an entire, they have the chapter broken down by analog and electronic. They talk about how to scan as well and the different types you can use for that. So just those are two great books. Of course, the FAA one is available for free. Rod's, I like his dad humor. This thing has puns and everything else. I love his pictures, so I'm always a big proponent of Rod stuff. But it's like if his sense of humor is not for you, that's okay. Check out the FAA stuff. It's a good source. But let's get back to the content here. So the inverted V, you can do the same thing. So I do love a good electronic display. At first, it was a little weird getting used to, especially the tape. These numbers would drive you crazy. And one thing that I've learned is that you have to be willing to be like, it's 4,002 feet, and that is okay, because you'll drive yourself nuts trying to keep it exactly on zero because it is so precise and sensitive versus the analog where the needle's moving and like we settle in. But what you can do is once you get stabilized again, you can still use the inverted V on an electronic display. So what you're looking for there is you're watching the little heading trend indicator that'll pop out right here over the heading indicator part. So there's that little trend line that'll come out here. You're looking for the VSI, which is right here. So you're making, again, is this deflecting up or down? Then I need to come back to my attitude indicator and reset where I want to be. So you can still use the principles of the inverted V, and Ralph Butcher even talks about that in his article because he was an airline pilot. So just think it's useful. All right. So hopefully that's helpful. That's my big tip on the scan. Try the inverted V. Now, let's do a little bit of this. I'm going to go kind of quickly through these charts. Go ahead, Stephen.
Oh, just I guess a couple comments.
Yeah.
Or sort of questions. So like, would the inverted V also be advised for VFR flying?
Yeah, sure. Now, of course, with VFR flying, the thing I'd recommend there is really learning how to control your attitude looking outside. So if you can really hone in and get precise with your visual pitch against the horizon using, like I like to use the cowl of the airplane, that you will find actually will work really well. And then Jen just quick scans inside, because I wouldn't want you guys focusing all that time inside on the inverted V while you got outside to look where you can look for traffic. The inverted V is amazing for instrument flight because we have to have all of our attention inside when we're in the clouds. When we're outside flying in, like we're flying in VFR conditions, but under an instrument flight, that's different, where we're kind of splitting the two and checking them both.
Okay. And then kind of, I guess it works well with that was, doesn't the VSI have a bit of a delay? Like, why not switch altimeter for VSI with the inverted V scan?
Great question. And the reason for that is, yes, the VSI does have a delay, but it is super sensitive. And so that's the thing that amazed me, because I used to do the same thing. I used to think, oh, that VSI, what's the point? Because it's a lag to it and everything else. But what it does is it will show you those up and down movements really quickly. What the delay is on how much that rate of climb or descent is. So try it. Go when you were trying to hold, like say in that case, holding altitude, or even like I said, on the descent, maybe doing an ILS approach. That VSI will quickly show you those trends. So it's like, oh, hey, it's starting to dip, and then you immediately go back to the attitude indicator, reset, or I'm trying to hold level, and I see that deflection right back to the attitude indicator. And trust me, if you get that thing back under control, the altimeter won't move. So it reacts quickly in terms of moving, but it's sort of settling down is where that lag is. So trust me on this. I used to kind of not pay attention to the VSI. The inverted V changed my instrument flying and made it so much more precise. So it really is very powerful.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. So let's take a look at just some basic instrument charts. These are the things that were a mystery. So I'm just going to do a quick overview. This is the part where I did a deep dive in that previous episode. So let me just give you the basics here. What do we do in instrument flying for those that are new to it when it comes to getting off the ground? Well, we have things like obstacle departure procedures. And so these are found in the takeoff minimum section. And you can usually, if you're using like an electronic flight bag, like a ForeFlight or a Garmin Pilot, they have that information in there. Or if you're using paper, those of you that are still using some of those books, you would find these in the instrument approach booklet. And I forget where they are in the JEP charts. I think they're associated with it. I think on the airport page for some reason, along with all the other charts. Been a while since they used the JEP charts, but here it is. It has the departure procedure here. And so, for example, out of Frederick, Maryland, it tells you if you're taking off runway 5, you're going to make a climbing left turn heading 340 on the Frederick VOR on the 010 radial, climb to 2,100 feet, and then proceed on course. And these are just ways for you to depart the runway without hitting anything. So it's going to give you that obstacle clearance. There are some conditions that they are dependent on. As you can see on the bottom, crossing the end of the runway, at least at 35 feet AGL, you have to climb to 400 feet above airport elevation before you turn. These are just standard for all departure procedures. And then climb at least 200 feet per nautical mile unless otherwise stated. And there's a table with these that you can find in the kind of the legend of the instrument approach charts and things like that. So check it out. So this is just, we literally give you a procedure to get out up off the ground and away at a lot of these airports. And then the other part is that, again, I'm doing these charts. I'm going to go a little more in detail into an instrument approach chart. But for especially for my folks out there that are just kind of interested in this, I am sure as part of your private, you have learned about things like Victor Airways. You saw them on the sectional, and you might have wondered, oh, what are those for? It's like, and so I'm going to show you just here. I'll click in a second. Here is Martinsburg Airport near us. Here's Frederick, right where we are right now. And you see these blue lines, Victor Airways. And there's even, I'm trying to show, it shows the T routes right here. So you can see those. When I click the slide here, now you're going to see the instrument version of this. And notice what it does is, because we're in the clouds, we can't see all those geographical features, and it makes it pop out these radio sources of navigation in this case. So here are our Victor Airways in black. They even tell us, in this case, they add on information that we didn't have on the visual chart, like here's your minimum altitude that you're going to fly on that, and that gives you reception and obstacle clearance at 3,200 feet. It gives you this 38 is just distance between segments, and of course it's cut off here so we can't see it. And here's a T route, which is a GPS-based route using RNAV or GPS type navigation. Here are the VORs. Here are your airports right here in different colors, and even the navigation numbers. Go ahead, Stephen.
Oh, just while we're doing this, do the departure procedures apply to helicopters, or how do they apply to helicopters? I guess specifically the altitude, which is high for a heli.
That is, you know what, I actually don't know the answer to that one because I'm not a helicopter pilot.
Okay.
That's a good question. Yeah, that might be a good one for our pilot information center, because I know we've got Craig Brown who flies helicopters. I would have to do some research, or honestly, I would go ask those folks. So that's 1-800-USA-AOPA. If you're a member, give our pilot information center a call, 1-800-USA-AOPA. And I'm sure they would know the answer to that off the top of their head. That's a good one. I would imagine with helicopters, they generally they have a pretty steep climb gradient. So I'd imagine I know they have different rules. I just don't know what those are for a departure procedure.
Okay.
And if anybody in the chat does know, please let us know, because I bet there's somebody out there that does know this. Okay, now this is the one that I wanted just to spend just a minute on, just kind of going through it. This was the part that always blew my mind when I was going through my training and kind of getting into my instrument training, was what are these things? They just seemed like they were written in a different language, but they're really not that bad. So this is an instrument approach plate, and basically what you want to think of is this is a both vertical and horizontal plan for getting you from that en route environment using those Victor Airways, for instance, or just your en route navigation where you're up at cruise, and getting you down from that cruise segment down to the airport in a very specific and precise manner. So the first part is, you can see right here, it's going to have effective dates. These are about a year old here, so they're no longer good. But it shows you the effective dates. You're always going to check, are my charts up to date? And then it gives you a briefing strip that I will zoom in on right here. In the briefing strip, what you're going to see is all the frequencies at that airport. So it's going to give you some basic information. Here's your primary nav aid. I'm going to use the pointer over here to point at things. So right here's your primary nav aid for this approach. It's using a VOR. You've got your final approach course. That's the last bit. You'll see that on the plan, or the plan view in just a minute here, and just showing you the course you're going to fly from that nav aid down to the runway. It's going to give you information about the runway, including how long it is, the touchdown zone, the elevation of it. In this case, it's 788 feet, and the overall airport elevation. This one's at 789. It gives you the name of the procedure because air traffic control is going to assign you. You're going to do the VOR runway 34 to Carroll County. And then it's going to potentially give you any alternate procedures that might be applicable. In this case, there aren't any in this particular approach. It's going to tell you, what do you do if you get down and you don't see the runway, or if something goes wrong and you lose navigation or you got off course. It gives you a method for getting out of there again without hitting anything. It's got all the radio frequencies you could want. So I'm sure you recognize this: AWAS, approach control with Potomac. This one right here is just military. The ground control there at the airport, and then the Unicom overall. It's like maybe calling for fuel, that sort of thing. And actually, that's their CTAF frequency as well. And then it gives you that larger view, right? So that the wider view of like what we normally would see with a map looking down. And so in this case, we've got, here's the VOR. It gives us a racetrack pattern right here. It's like we would typically use this for holding, but it's also used for getting you ready. You'd come in, you'd maybe start this circling depending on how you were assigned, and then you're going to follow course 358, and it's a radial off of this VOR down to the runway. And there's this little part right here showing you this is what that missed approach that I talked about earlier would be like. Go ahead, Stephen.
Oh, kind of relating to this and some previous stuff. On ILS approach, how much time is devoted to the glide scope instrument and inverted V-scan relative to each other?
So when you're looking at the actual ILS, so you've got to then monitor both. So it's the normal thing. So time-wise, I couldn't tell you. It's basically my eyes are moving. So I'm going to have, obviously, watching that attitude indicator overall. I'm going to be quickly scanning. So probably what I do is when I'm actually scanning that for the inverted V, I'm looking at the attitude indicator. I'm doing that quick scan down to the turn coordinator, back up to attitude indicator, over to the VSI just to check, is it showing me what I want? And then I'm going to quickly glance over at the ILS, see where I'm in, back to the attitude indicator. So I tend to like use the attitude indicator as my general hub. I know what my pitch down should be in this case. I know what my power should be. So hopefully I've set those things generally up. So power should have been set as I start that approach and I'm starting my descent. So it's like I will adjust it as needed, but really I'm going to be focusing on attitude indicator, quick scan down the inverted V, and then over checking my navs. If you are lucky enough to have all that in an HSI, a horizontal situation indicator, where you've got your heading indicator and your vertical and horizontal guidance all combined in one, that makes it really easy to do this scan. But like I said, what I found is that inverted V just makes it so much more precise because I can quickly adjust. Oh, hey, I'm going down. I wanted to be going 500 feet per minute. I'm doing 600, back to the attitude indicator, pitch it up slightly, retrim if needed, and then back to my scan again. So hopefully that answers that question.
Hope so, yeah. Yeah, so comment here from Peter. Big discussion he keeps saying is, when do the charts and nav databases actually expire? Like what time of day? The question seems to come up with the navigation database and a GPS. So what do you say when the database actually expires?
That's a good one for BSC too. I don't know that one off the top of my head because of course it's like it's noon Eastern time. I don't know. The big thing that I would say too is that usually I'm already thinking like on that approach chart that I've got here, it expires on 18 April back in 2024. So in the case there, it's like already the new plates are out. You've already got the new one. So yeah, it's like, I guess the question I would have too is a little bit of, as long as the information has to change and the charts are current, I don't know how critical it is that you're using this chart versus the one that comes after it on the preceding day. Because I think even in the regs, and I'd have to double check this, but my recollection is that even in the regs, it says that as long as the information is correct, it's the same. Then the date, it's like you could, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can legally fly even if you were using like this the next day, as long as the information hadn't changed. So I'm wondering how critical it is for that database number there. So that's a good one though. I would definitely call it PIC on that one.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't know the answer off the top of my head. Okay. Now let's look at the detail of that plan view again. So I already kind of talked about this, and it just gives you that sort of horizontal guidance. Over in the upper left-hand corner, it also gives you just a general, how do I make sure I avoid things if I'm not quite sure, if I got a little off course. So in this case, if I'm to that northwest quadrant or northwest half of this, if I'm at 3,400 feet, I have no worries about hitting anything, and I'm also getting radio reception, or at least a navigation reception. And then to the southeast side of that, 2,600 feet. So it's sort of an emergency thing. If something were to happen, I could climb to those altitudes and know that I'd be safe while I sort things out. And then the last bit of it is this lower area, which gives us more detailed information about the airport, and it gives us the vertical part of what we are doing. I'm just trying to watch my time here. So here is the information about the actual airport. I'm going to bring the mouse over here and just show you guys what I'm looking at. So right here gives you, this is where that course would bring you onto the runway. Notice it's not exactly lined up with the runway. It's an angle to it. So I'd be looking for the runway to be kind of angled off of my direct course. It's not going to be straightly, straight in front of me when I break out of the clouds. It gives me information about the types of lights that I might see. So in this case, we got runway and identifier lights. On this case, runway 34. I got medium intensity runway lights on the runways as well. And then right here, it tells me, this is something, again, I'm not going to go into all the fine details, but it tells me how much time it would take me flying at these speeds. Most general aviation aircraft probably at that 90 or 120 knot approach speed, how long it would be for me to go from the final approach fix here. So I'd start my timer here to get to the runway. And then that way, if for some reason I didn't know, like, how do I know when I'm done? I can't see. How do I know that haven't I flown over the airport yet or not? I would use my timer. And if I reach that timer and I'm down at altitude and I just don't see anything, that's when I know I'm going to start my missed approach. Go to the next one. And so right here is the profile view in terms of looking sideways at it. So all this is a vertical map. In that racetrack pattern I talked about, I'm at 2,900 feet or above. That's what that line means underneath of there. It gives me the heading, 358 inbound, 178 outbound for those. And then I'd start my descent here at the VOR, at the VORTAC. And it even tells me in a second here, I'll show the minimums, but it says 358. It gives me, if I've got DME or GPS information off of this VOR, then I would know at this point, I could start my visual approach to descend, or at this point, I'd start my missed approach. I've gone far enough. I don't see the runway. It's time to get out of there. And then finally, there's the category 2 for these speeds that I mentioned down here. It gives you minimums. Let me go back one. So the minimums are right here. So that this is for these areas right here, it tells me what's the minimum altitude that I can descend to on this approach, because it's going to keep me safe from hitting anything, but also try to give me the best chance I can of seeing the airport. And the categories, you'll see A, B, C, D, and there's even an E, not on this approach though. And it just tells me the speed. So category A, if I'm flying, if my 1.3 VSO is less than 90 knots, then I would fly in category A. I'd use those minimums. If I'm between 91 and 120, then I'd be using these minimums and so on. So it just gives us the basic profile of how to get down. All right, questions, Stephen, before I move on?
No, we're good.
All right, so here's the one that I really did want to talk about, some of my tips, because I have noticed that, I don't know if you all know, but like obviously GPS, everybody knows, is kind of taken over what we do in flying. It really has become our primary nav aid, but VOR is our official, it's our official backup in case the GPS system, say it were to fail. And I know Felix says, I got a handheld. But it's like maybe there's something where you lose the signal, and that has happened where it's like there are areas where sometimes you might lose the GPS signal, or maybe your equipment fails and you don't have a backup. The VOR is your official backup. And the thing is, though, it's not a backup if you don't know how to use it. So for those folks, especially those coming up, I've noticed a definite lack of knowing how to use a VOR, and that's what I wanted to talk about. So the first thing I wanted to mention here was, and a lot of this is covered in things like the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, or in, for example, Rod Machado's Private Pilot Handbook. There are a lot of explanations out there about how this works. there is a great simulator. It's called the I think it's the iFly, or I have it listed there. I'm blanking on the name of it right now. GoFly. It's this app that I'm using is a great way to practice learning VORs. So first question, how can I tell where I am from the VOR in relation to that VOR? The tip that I like to give, and I'm sure my instrument folks out there have already heard this before, but it's from top to bottom. What I'm looking at is we're going to use VOR number 1. Oops, let me go back one here. I know that it says here there's like a 2 and a 1 superimposed in this simulator. I had to like take the 2 VORs and put them on top of each other just to try to make it visually not as confusing. So even though there's a 2 there, we're using number 1 because they're both on top of each other. So ignore this one for right now, for the whole time. So I've got this thing centered up. I centered up the VOR, and what I'm getting is a from indication, the FR, the little down arrow. And what I know is that if I want to know where am I in relation to that VOR, I use this from indication, and then I know this little mnemonic, from top. So where am I in relation to it? Well, I have a from indication, go to the top. So where this needle is centered to the top, I am west of the VOR. And you can notice right here that I am indeed west of the VOR. Let's flip it. And all I did was rotate the CDI, or the course deviation, and actually it's the OBS, blanket on the name of it. You guys help me out there. But I turn the VOR indicator all the way around just 180 degrees to its reciprocal, and I have a 2 indication. And so when I have a 2 indication, and again, I'm asking myself, where am I in relation to the VOR? 2, go to the bottom. So I see 2, it's centered up, go to the bottom, and it says that I am west of the VOR, and indeed I am west. So let's take a look at another example of that. Here it is again, just to show you, we have a from indication. So with a from indication, from top, I go to the top, it says I am north of the VOR, and indeed I am north of the VOR. By the way, these skills work on GPS too. So you can use it if you go in GPS and put it in OBS, or like I think sometimes it's called hold mode, you can treat any waypoint like it's a VOR. And then I flip one more time. In this case, I now have a 2 indication. All I did was rotate it around 180 degrees. And so if I have a 2 indication, and I'm asking myself the question, where am I from that VOR? 2, go to the bottom. It says I'm north of it, and indeed I am north. Hopefully that makes sense. I know I'm going quickly. I'm hoping these are some basics. Now, let's do a quick quiz. I'll give you guys a moment. Where is the aircraft? Look at VOR number 1. I have it centered up for you. We have a from indication. Can you tell me where the airplane will be? And I will reveal it here in just a moment. So I'll give you like 10, 20 seconds. Where are we in relation? Remember the mnemonic, from top to bottom. And everything that I'm doing with this, by the way, is in that little simulator. It's like the FlyGo IFR simulator. Like I said, I put the name of it in the handout. This thing is amazing for learning this stuff. Okay, let's take a look. Hopefully everybody came up with something. Let's see. Hopefully you said it's a from indication. So from top, that I am southwest, kind of southwest on that, about the 236 radial, and there we are. That's where the airplane is. So you can literally figure out where you are just using this little trick. Here's another one. We have a 2 indication, and I'm showing about 016. So I like to just look at the cardinals here, but I'll give you another moment just to think about it yourself. From top to bottom, we have a 2 indication. Where is the airplane?
We had a lot of Southwest responses in the last one.
Awesome. Yeah. So where are we on this one? From top to bottom. I see them because I know there's a delay, so they pop in before I can see them, or they pop in after I've already answered.
Right. Yeah, there's the
okay
FCC delay.
The FCC, exactly, because we're always trouble. Okay, let's go ahead. Hopefully you thought to yourself, to bottom, so I'm going to look at the bottom of the needle, and the airplane is somewhere kind of mostly south, so it should be down here somewhere if we're correct, and there it is. It's to the south. So super easy way, southwest. I'm seeing they're finally coming in on the 195. Good. So that's the basics of how you do that. Now, the other thing that I wanted to show you was, this is one that I find that it's like that basic orientation I have definitely seen as a weak point for a lot of folks. They just don't get the VOR, or they've only taken the FAA written tests, and the FAA written test questions are not a great way to learn how we actually use it. So what I just did was a really simple thing that I do, and that I find useful for figuring out where the heck I am, especially because I learned back in the days before we had GPS. So this one now is, how do we intercept the VOR course? I know that the standard teaching is you set up maybe like a 45-degree intercept, maybe a 30-degree intercept, and just fly it till it centers and turn. I have found this little trick called riding the needle, I call it. I had an instructor of mine in the past call it riding the lubber line on an HSI. It makes a nice, smooth intercept. So here's what I'm going to talk about. You're going to see right over here that we've got full deflection of the needle. And what I talk about is this is the lubber line or the needle. And then what I do is I imagine this line going straight up, and it's going to touch numbers here. This is going to tell me a heading that if I want to intercept whatever this course is, in this case, it's the it's going to be what, like the 260 radial going inbound to the VOR, 26 radial going inbound. I fly this heading. If I fly about 030, this will put me on a nice intercept for it. The key that I'm going to do, though, is as the needle slowly moves over, I'm going to be paying attention to what it's now pointing at. As it points at these other numbers, I'm just going to change my heading to those other numbers, and you'll find that I've got this really nice smooth intercept. So watch this as I do this. You can do this on the simulator and live, and I'll show a video of that. So there's my little graphic showing that this is what I'm looking at. I'm going to be paying attention now in my example here to this VOR and then the heading indicator down below. So the first thing I do is I change my heading to about 030, and then we start the airplane moving. So I'm just going to click as we go. So watch here, the airplane starts to move. I'm flying about 030, waiting for that needle to move. As it moves, and I'm not sure what happened there with my photo, but as it moves, notice now the needle is pointing to about 050 approximately, and I've changed my heading. So you'll notice that I've now changed heading, slowly starting to reduce that angle of intercept. Go to the next one, boom, the needle moved to about 060 because the needle's going to slowly move as I bring it in as I'm getting closer to my radial, and I change my heading to 060. And then as I get really, really close, then what I'll do is I know that my final is going to be 080. So at about 10 degrees before I'm going to be where I am, that I will finally hold until it's center. So it goes to 070. I'm going to turn the airplane to 070. And then finally, within about 10 degrees, just leave it, with the caveat being, if there is wind, then I may need to hold a bigger angle. Like if I find like, oh, you know what, I've reduced my angle and now I'm not making any progress on it, I probably need to bite into the wind a little bit more. And that's where you have to be aware of where's the wind coming from. It's out of the north or something. But in this case, no wind. This works really well. And it works with wind too. You just have to adjust. Like you may have to hold a slightly bigger heading for that final bit. So here is a video. And there it is. I'm finally on course on 080. Then I just turn and just hold my course and hold for intercept. And then no wind condition here. I would obviously hold a crab if I needed to. The cool thing is, as I'm doing that, it will help me figure out that crab as I go as well. So here's a quick video showing that in motion. So check this out. I'm going to just jump forward a little bit. You'll notice that on the top, on VOR number 1, that needle will start moving. It's pointing right now at 210. I'm flying heading 210. And you can see the airplane moving. This is just that simulator I was talking about. As I get closer, the needle starts to move. That's going to happen here in just a moment. And as the needle moves, I will adjust heading as it does. Here, I'll jump ahead. So I probably should just leave it alone because I know we're close. We'll see that needle start to move. There it goes. As the needle moves, it's going to 220. I turn the airplane to 220. It's moving quickly to 230. So I'm going to go ahead and start turning to 230. And notice how I make this nice, smooth intercept onto this radial. Just makes it really easy to get onto that. And it also helps you avoid those big angles where you end up blowing through it and then having to correct back to it. This works for both VFR and IFR flying. And so you can see it happening there. And I'll just let it center up and then we'll move on. All right, so I think we get the idea. And again, this is that I think it's called FlyGo Simulator. Again, I've listed the name on the handout. So if you're interested in this, this is a great purchase for really practicing the VOR and doing holds and all kinds of stuff. It is a great little, there's my video ending. Okay. Now, I don't know why I didn't get rid of that text box. We're going to talk a little bit about using that same information for holds. I'm going to try to give you my tips on holds. For those of the uninitiated, it says, how do I do this with a CDI that's not a vertical bar? Oh, good, Ed. Great question. Let me go back to that really quick. Oops, let me go backwards. So the question that Ed just had was, he's talking about the kind of VOR where the needle kind of goes like this. Instead, it sort of like pivots across the top and it swings back and forth with a pivot up here. And I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to mention that. But the way that I do that is that I look at where the bottom goes. So wherever the bottom of the needle is, imagine it being diagonal here, then I just draw an imaginary line straight up, and that's how I do it. If it's more than 45 degrees, then I'll kind of max out at about a 45 degree. And then as that needle swings back towards the middle, same thing. I'm just imagining that line straight up from it going to a number. So hopefully that helps you out there, Ed, because that's exactly, I do it with both types. HSI is even easier because you can literally see it on your heading indicator as you're doing it. Okay, let's talk just briefly about holds here really quick. I want to try to give you my tips on holds. Holds are racetrack patterns that we use. These tend to be the bane of someone going through their instrument training, trying to figure this holding stuff out, especially hold entries. So I'm going to quickly go through just how I draw a hold that I found that works really well with folks that whether I'm doing an IPC or whether with somebody new, and just teaching these in the first place. But basically a hold, you're going to hear me talk about the fix, which is whatever, like whether it's a waypoint or a VOR. We have an inbound course, that's where we're flying to the fix. We have our turn, this is the case that's an outbound turn. Our outbound course where we're paralleling and just kind of holding straight and level and then turning back inbound to re-intercept. And we just stay here. And ATC will use this for delays, or we might use it for what's called a course reversal on an approach. Again, things that you'll learn more in detail about as you go through your instrument training. Step number one that I would recommend, of course, is copy down that hold clearance. So always copy the hold clearance. This is the basics of it for the uninitiated. They're going to give us something like a fix, whether it's the EMI VOR, which is that one at Westminster. Hold at they might say something like hold north of the EMI VOR, and that's the holding fix itself. That could be omitted, as it mentions here, if you have a clearance limit. By the way, there's an entire article in this in the handout. And then they're going to tell you either the radial, the course, the bearing, or the airway, or a route on which you're going to hold. They'll give you some specific. We're going to use VORs today, VOR radial. Leg length in minutes or miles if DME or RNAV, so they might tell you hold 5 mile legs, or they might tell you 1 minute legs or 1.5 minute legs, so they may specify that. The direction of the turn. Unlike traffic patterns where we always turn left, in the case of a hold, we assume right unless they tell us otherwise. And then finally, they're going to give you an expect further clearance time so you can be ready and planning. So let's just talk about now. This is the part that always seems to help folks. Number one, here are my steps. So I'll leave this up for a second. And in fact, I believe these are all in the, I believe they're in the handout, one of the articles too, but here are my basic steps. Number one, draw the fix. This will be on every slide for those of you that are trying to jot it down. So don't worry about trying to rush. If you're trying to save this, I know Stephen can make the notes available to you as well. But draw the fix. The first thing I do on my little piece of paper or on my scan is I draw the fix. Then I draw the radial or that bearing. In this case, I'm drawing the radial. It's a 190 radial from. All right, so it's the radial from or a bearing to. So I have to estimate. I do my best. You have to get good at your angles. I think, okay, 180 straight down, 190 is about here. So I try to do my best to just eyeball it. Then I draw an arrow for the inbound leg. Really important because this helps you maintain that situational awareness of what is going on. The other thing I do is do what I call a common sense check. Is this 190 radial? That should be, I think of myself, 180 south, 190 south, and just a little bit to the west. Is this thing south and a little bit to the west of that? It looks good. That way I know that it's where it should be. Then the next part I do is draw an arrow for the direction of the inbound leg I already mentioned, then draw my turn. So the reason we draw this arrow is so that I know that as I go inbound, which way should I be turning? So as I go inbound, I turn, and in this case, it's going to be right-hand turn. So I make a right turn. So I literally take my pen or pencil or my stylus, and I move it this way and go, okay, right turn, boom, right turns. So I draw my right turn. And then from there, it's pretty easy. I draw the rest of the legs and the other leg and the turn. So I just click on, here's the outbound leg, here's my turn back inbound. So now I know which directions I'll be turning. I even draw a little arrow here to help myself. So I know that's my outbound. And then the final part is I label the numbers, because while I'm doing the hold, I want to know what heading is sort of my initial thing that I'm going to be flying. And so in this case, I would go, here's my 010 inbound. And this is where that common sense checks. I think I put common sense on here again, didn't I? I don't know if I did. Nope, I didn't. So the common sense check here is the 190 is going this way. This direction is that southerly type direction. And so then I use my reciprocal. There's tricks you can use for this and figuring those out. For 190, you can either you can add 200 to it and then take some away or whatever. Like you just have to know it's 180 degrees different. So with 190, I can subtract 180 pretty easily from that, getting 10. Or you can subtract, if you can go negative, subtract 200 and then add 20. So 200 minus 190, sorry, 190 minus 200 is negative 10. Add 20 gives me to a positive 10. There's various mathematical tricks for that. But here's the basic idea. So now I've got this basically set up. And I know I've got about 5 minutes left. Let's see if I can just hit this one part. The key part is now we bring back in that knowledge we learned, whether we're using a GPS or a VOR. Where am I? If I have a GPS, I'll see where the airplane is and I can kind of just draw it. I draw it on my paper and say, here's where I am. If I don't have that and I'm using a VOR, let's say, then I would use my knowledge. I center the needle up. I'm heading to the fix. It says that I'm centered up with a 2 indication. And remember, from top to bottom. So the 2 bottom, I am northwest. So I'm up here somewhere. So let's see if I'm right. And there's the airplane. And now I eyeball it. And this gets into, like, I don't have time to obviously like teach you guys all the entries. But the basics are I eyeball it for my folks that already know how to do these entries. And then I estimate, what does this look like to me? Well, it's definitely not a direct entry because I'd have to be down here. And it doesn't quite look like a parallel because that'd be really awkward. So this looks like a teardrop to me. So I eyeball it. If I'm over here, I'm looking at it, it looks like, oh, that would be a nice parallel entry. If I'm down here, that looks like a direct. So first eyeball it, then I do this little trick. This will be the last part that I teach you guys. What I'm talking about for my folks out there that don't have their instrument ratings, you will spend time learning, which are the different types of entries. Direct, teardrop, or parallel. There's lots of information. I have articles that I put there for you. It's in things like Rob Machado's book, The Instrument Flying Handbook. But let's just talk about my trick for doing this. I love this trick. There's an article I put in there as well that talks about this. It might be the bold method one that I stuck in there, but I use this little thumb trick. Other folks use their hands upside down. There's stuff with a pen you can do. I like this thumb one because I don't have to worry about having anything with me, and it's relatively easy. So how do I know which entry to use? Well, once you're navigating to that fix, look for the sector where the outbound leg falls on your heading indicator. So in the case, I'm going to show you in detail what I just did. So literally notice what I'm doing. I stick my thumb, if it's right turns, I use my right thumb, left turns, my left thumb on my heading indicator. And then if it falls in this quadrant up here, it's parallel. If the outbound leg falls in this quadrant, it's a teardrop entry. Actually, sorry, folks, this is wrong. This needs to be flipped. So it's parallel on the, because I didn't flip them for you. The teardrop is the smaller one, parallel here. I've got to fix this graphic. It is correct in the article, so no worries there. But this is the correct one. This right-hand turn parallel here, please flip these. And if I'm anywhere down in here for my outbound leg, that is a direct entry. So let's just show you in detail how this will work. So, oops, go back one. Here we are. Here's the hold that we just drew. I use my outbound leg, 190. I do my little thumb trick. I am flying directly to it. I've already, my heading indicator is flying directly to it. I've got it all centered up with my navs. I put my right thumb, and you'll notice that what your right thumb does is it falls right about 20 degrees above the middle here. So it's about 20 degrees above the 90-degree mark. So a lot of times you'll have those markings on your heading indicator. And then I just imagine this line going to 20 degrees below the sort of parallel line that would normally cut this in half. And then I'd look for 190. 190 falls right there. This tells me it's a teardrop entry. So I use both my visual and I use this little trick to verify teardrop looks like the right thing to do. And then I go from there and fly the approach. Okay, tell you what we're gonna do now is let me go ahead and we're gonna officially end. I do have a little video of me doing this, but we don't have quite time for that. And what I will do is I'm gonna jump ahead really quick here. There's the video, we're just gonna skip that for right now. Right to my unroute tips, and then we'll officially end it. And then I'll answer all your questions. Unroute tips. We all learned the craft clearance. For those the uninitiated so far, you're gonna learn this thing. This is the way that your clearance comes. When ATC gives it to you, your instructor will work with you on learning how to do a clearance. And so what I do is I literally I'll take a piece of paper or I'll use an electronic one. I have that craft part to get my clearance down so I can see what ATC has assigned me to do during my instrument flight, here's the pro tip. I like to write below that H, A, and F, heading, altitude, frequency, and I keep a little record. So when ATC says, you know, but it's like 396, turn heading 345, I jot down 345, and then I go and I put it on my heading bug and so on. And then they might give me another heading 030, so I jot that down, and that way I've got a record of what they told me last. Same for my altitude. They might say climb and maintain 4,000, I jot down 4,000, then I go ahead and adjust everything else. The key thing that is the most helpful on this is that frequency. I keep a record of all the frequencies, so that way if I lose comms or if I can't get a hold of the next person, I can go back to that previous frequency. So keeping a record, this is useful for VFR. I do the same thing when I'm flying VFR and say I'm on a flight following. I want to know what that frequency is. So this is a great tip. If you don't already do this, I highly recommend HAF, heading, altitude, frequency. And I just draw 2 lines down and just keep my little columns going. And then my final tip that I want to give you is, if I could tell you anything, the thing that I've learned the most about instrument flying, and this works for visual flying too, is you should always be asking yourself, what's next? Do not get complacent, don't get lazy. You've got to make sure you stay ahead of the airplane, and the way you do that is what's coming up next? What am I doing next? What's next on the approach? Should I be getting my AWAS next? Is my approach briefed, and so on? So anyway, I've got more tips, but we could talk about that a different time. Let me just skip past this. I did come to the end of what I presented. I'm hoping this was helpful. Let's just make sure that for all the folks out there, hopefully all you are AOPA members, but if for some reason you're not, well, of course, we would say you should be. AOPA is, of course, the world's largest aviation community. We are here to help protect your freedom to fly, and we've got lots of resources to help you out, including our Pilot Information Center, lots of great courses from the Air Safety Institute, savings and programs and special offers. So if you're interested, check it out, aopa.org/membership. We would love to have you part of our community. Next episode. So this is the official end for those looking for Wings credit. I'm going to stick around and answer questions for you. But next episode coming up April 17th, 2025, 12 to 1 Eastern. I hope I got the Zulu correct because I was adjusting. We're on daylight savings here now. So it should be 1600 Z or UTC. Our topic, what's up, Doc? Ask an aviation medical tech. And so basically what we're going to do is, Stephen, I think we're going to put the link in the chat or the questions. We're going to put it on the materials going out. You get to ask us questions that you would like to have. We have Cade Hale coming on board. He is used to be working in our Pilot Information Center as a medical tech. He's going to answer your aviation-related medical questions, and he's really, really good. So we're looking forward to having him on. But you get to tell us the questions that you would like to ask. So please let us know. The only caveat is we will put sort of an expiration date on the questions. We need them about a week before we do the episode for us to be able to put them all together. All right, Stephen, what do you got?
Well, just to mention, back at the beginning, I shared the wrong link for the forms. I actually shared the question form for the next episode, and then went back and shared the proper form for Wings credit. So it's been shared earlier in the chat. I've shared it again. A lot of questions towards the end of where to get the handout. If you are not able to get it from the button on the icon next to the question button is not cooperating, you can contact me directly at ftinitiative@aopa.org. So Foxtrot Tango Initiative, and I'll email them out to folks who need it that way. That's not a problem to do that. So.
By the way, we just had somebody, Santos just asked about looking at this one slide I skipped past. So I was going to just go do a review of lost comms. This graphic is in your handout. It's Air Safety Institute. It's their comms one. I think it says say what or something. It's kind of radio scripts, but it has the whole flow for instrument flying for if you lose communications. And this makes it a little bit easier to kind of sort out those regs because it can be kind of confusing. So check it out. It's in the handout. Again, all those that are listed on there, and Stephen just talked about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
What do we got, Stephen?
We did have some good questions. I'm going to give you this one while I scroll back up. Someone just asked if you could describe the difference between primary and supporting instruments.
Sure. Let me just go backwards here so I can use there we go. I'm going to go back to that one where I had the picture of the flight instruments. My gosh. We talked about a lot of stuff. Okay. So primary and supporting. So that I'm assuming this is someone that is that may be working. I'm just going to take my jacket off. Of course, as I predicted, it got warm in here. it was cold previously for whatever reason. So primary and supporting instruments, basically what you do is that there's the various methods of doing it. There's what's called control performance method, and then there's primary supporting method for flying. Control performance method is heavily dependent on the attitude indicator, and it's kind of what the military uses, especially in their jets. It is a very powerful way of scanning, and in the control performances, you know what pitch you might want set for a particular condition, whether that's cruise at level, whether that is turning, and whether that's a 3-degree descent, whatever it may be. And then you set your power. So you know that if I set power here and set my pitch here, I'm going to get performance on the rest of the instrument. So control is I set pitch and power, and then I just check with my other instruments, are they giving me what I want? The other most common method that the FAA talks about as well in the instrument flying handbook is called primary supporting. And so what primary supporting means is that for any given maneuver, I'm going to have certain instruments that will give me the best information. This is what I used to do, and that's what when I learned to fly on instruments at first, and even when I was first instructing on instruments, this is the one because I knew, like, hey, this works pretty well. And this is what I talked about, where I used to ignore the vertical speed indicator because I was doing primary supporting. So here's the way that works. Say, for example, that I want to fly straight and level. What would be the question you ask yourself is, what instruments would I want to use to help me determine I'm flying level and I'm flying straight? So out of this picture right here, well, I've got my attitude indicator, which gives me that big overall picture. And then my primary for level in this case is going to be the altimeter, because that's going to tell me I want to be flying level at 3,000 feet. Well, the altimeter is the one that tells me that. So I'm going to go from attitude indicator and scan here. Am I holding altitude? Then the other one I want to know is, again, I'm trying to hold straight and level. What's going to tell me if I'm flying straight, the heading that I wanted? Well, that would be the heading indicator. So my primary for heading in that case would be the heading indicator. So my scan is going to mostly focus on attitude indicator, check my altitude, back to attitude indicator, down to the heading indicator. As long as these are where I want them, I'm good to go. And if I see any deviations, then I make small adjustments. I'll give you one more example of that. Say that I want to be doing a standard rate turn. And so maybe I want to do a level turn. I want to hold altitude while changing heading. Well, in that standard rate turn, I want to hold standard rate. Well, what instrument tells me that? That's going to be the turn coordinator when I bank over, and then the little airplane here is going to show me my rate of turn with a little wing on that white line that's going to represent the standard rate turn. So in that case, for a level standard rate turn, my primary for bank is going to be the turn coordinator. If I see it banked too much here, the rate of turn going too quickly, I go up and I reduce my bank of the attitude indicator and then come back and check it. And then for holding level, again, I'm scanning over to the altimeter. What I'm then doing, though, is that I'm just every once in a while, of course, checking my heading indicator to see when is my heading coming up that I wanted. Probably set it with if I have a heading bug on the heading indicator, I would set that to help me visually see where that is. Otherwise, I've got to have it in my mind where I'm going. So that's primary. Primary are the main ones that I'm looking at. The supporting are all the other ones. Because, for example, if I'm trying to hold level and I want to know what altitude I am, primary is going to be the altimeter, but supporting would be things like the vertical speed indicator. It will show me up and down movement, and so will the airspeed indicator. Because if I'm going down, I'm descending, airspeed is going to increase. If I'm climbing, it's going to decrease. So those are supporting for the primary of that one. Hopefully that helps you with that part. This is where that inverted V was so out of my realm that I just never used it, because I'm flying straight and level and I'm looking at these instead. So my primary focus is I'm looking here for my bank and I'm looking here for the level. And the reason is because it's not like that I'm not looking at these other ones, but when I know that these are under control, these don't move. And that's what's amazing about it. So again, it took me time rereading and then reading that article. And I went in the simulator here at AOPA. I was just like, hey, let me go try this really quick. And I did it. And I was like, holy cow, this is amazing. And that's why I wanted to share it. So, okay. All right, what's the next question?
It was a good answer for that one then. Clarify the instruments. With the glass panel, autopilot, and ADSB in and out, but no navigator containing an approach database, is it legal to fly IFR en route when the destination is clear?
No, because it's like you would have to have, and again, I'm going to go 90% on this answer. I'm actually probably like 99% on this answer. I'm not going to make the blanket like I am absolutely right on this, but without the having approach stuff, I can't see how an airplane would be certified. And the only reason I'm 99% is because of the fact of I'd have to go and look up the official requirements for an airplane to be IFR certified. Honestly, the way that I know is they'll say this airplane's IFR certified, and I'm like, good. And I know that those airplanes all will have approach stuff in them, because if you're going to be on an instrument flight plan, you need to be able to make an instrument approach, and you can't do that in that case. So my 99% answer to that one is no, you may not do that.
AOPA's official position is.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. That's why I'm saying this is Chris's answer to that. Can you give us a call at the Pilot Information Center, and we can they can find the reg for you and everything too.
Since we're on opinions, as an instructor, do you find pilots over 60 have a more difficult time when earning their instrument rating, and any tips you might be able to offer?
Well, of course, it's like of course it depends on how active have you kept your brain. Of course, we know that as we get older, it's always harder to learn new things, but it depends on how you think. What I have found is that there are typically, to me, like two types of pilots. We have the pilots that love visual flying, and so for them, the private and the commercial are their absolute joy, because you're looking outside and you're doing all that kind of maneuvering, and there's a lot of thinking that has to happen when you're flying on instruments, and it takes all that focus. So there are folks that love visual flying that find instrument flying to be kind of more of a chore, and they don't enjoy it as much. Not that they can't do it, but they just don't enjoy it as much. And then there are folks that will go from doing their private, come to their instrument. And I know for me, like, it's a challenge and it was hard, but when you get it, it is so rewarding, because all of a sudden you're breaking out of the clouds, and there's the runway. And so for me, I really enjoyed the instrument flying, just because there's that whole aspect of learning to think. And I'm not going to lie, it is challenging. You're going to stretch your brain. So would folks that are 60 years or older have a harder time? It would depend on how sharp they've kept their brain and everything else. But it's like, if you're one that still enjoy learning, then go for it. Why not? And just be patient with yourself. That's the biggest thing. There's no race to this thing. And the other thing I would say is, I would highly recommend for the instrument, utilize, even if 10 hours is all you can use officially for an ATD or an aviation training device, the best way to learn instruments, all the fundamentals, is on that simulator. So don't feel like you have to go up and fly the airplane to do these things. Practice it in the simulator, because then you can pause it, you can talk, you can reset the scenario. And then once you get that, whatever the skill is you're trying to learn, then go practice it in the airplane, where you're getting bumped around and everything else. But it's a lot harder to learn in the airplane, because you're dealing with traffic and air traffic control. Learn the fundamentals, then go apply it in the airplane, and utilize that. And that way, be patient with yourself, take your time, and honestly have fun, because I really do enjoy it.
Okay. I kind of along that same idea, then Kenneth asked earlier, like, as an honest question, if you could dictate, so Chris, if you could dictate the requirements to become IFR rated, would you require some minimum amount of hours training in actual instrument conditions versus like the hood or the other training conditions?
Yes, because there is, I can remember I was fortunate enough during my instrument rating. I learned around here in Maryland, actually. It was back in the late 90s, to age myself. But
in the late 1900s.
Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah, exactly. So the thing there was that I got to fly in the clouds, and I can remember being under the hood, and I was like, I was doing pretty well, and we were doing our cross countries at that point, because towards the end of your training, you actually go on cross countries flying under instrument flight rules, with obviously your instructor being the pilot in command. And I remember we had the opportunity, we went into a cloud, and so I had the hood on, and we go into the cloud, my instructor's like, okay, take your hood off. And I can remember, like, I was doing well, I was all good under the hood. I took that hood off, and that sensation of actually being in the cloud it was like, holy cow, it is not the same. So yes, I would agree that people really, you need to go get some experience with an instructor in actual, because it is not the same as being under the hood. You're going to learn all the skills. The skills are all the same, but it's when you have that peripheral vision, where it's like, under the hood, you can always see a little bit and things like that. When it is, when you don't have that limiting device and all you see is clouds, it is like, it's like disorienting. And so it's good to then learn to say, okay, now all these things I've learned, I now discipline myself, follow those instruments, you'll be okay. But it is weird at first. So yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, that's, I guess, the spatial difference, like kind of being boxed in versus
It's not even
not
the boxed in, it's just you have no reference.
right.
You're so used to, like, we don't realize how much we use the horizon to balance ourselves, and there's none of that. And it's
Yeah,
the same way for shooting approaches. It's like, one thing under the hood, but it's another thing to actually be in the clouds. You're thinking, like, I can't just take my hood off and everything will be okay. I have to shoot these approaches down, and I have to stay on needles and everything else to get myself down to the ground safely.
yeah. Well, some of these questions actually touched on the cross country flight hours you just mentioned. So, see if I get this right. This 50 hours cross country can also include cross country flight during private pilot training, or must it all be after a private pilot certificate?
Let me look at that real quick. Flight, aeronautical
I guess they're
experience.
asking if there's some overlap there for the instrument requirements.
Yeah, I think it's just 50 hours of cross-country time as PIC. So I'm looking, this is under 6165 that I mentioned. I've just had my iPad over here with the FAR AIM app. And so it is 50 hours cross-country, and that just, again, as PIC. So things that you did during your private pilot training, as long as you were solo in that case before you had your private, that counts. And then you have to
Okay.
have been, anytime after your private, you have to have been the pilot in command of the aircraft. So to get to earn those cross country time, and you're going to do some of that cross country flying as part of your instrument training too. So
Okay.
it's not like you need 50 to start it. You're gonna probably do, I would guess, at least 5, if not 10 hours of cross country time just doing your instrument cross countries during your, under that IFR control and everything else, which is good experience. So
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any sort of limit, I guess, if you're doing some instrument stuff while you're doing your private? Like, only 10 hours if it counts toward instrument, or is it kind of
yes. So yeah, during your private, the training that you get during your private does not count, because by regulation under 61, and it's like 107 or 105, I'd have to go look up that reg, but it's in that reg under the private, the training you get during your private is called flight by reference to instruments. And so by reg and interpretation and everything else, they said that training is not instrument training. So the instrument training has to take place
okay?
after you have your private.
Okay.
Trust me, the minimum is 15 hours. You're going to do more than that. So don't worry about it. It's like, there's no point in trying to, like, in that, I don't know what to say. It's like, you're going to do more than 15 hours with an instructor. So don't even worry about that.
So can the hours of simulated or actual IFR be with a safety pilot that is not a CFI, or does it have to be an instrument rated CFI?
Yes, some of it can be, because the requirement under 6165 is for 15 hours of instruction with an authorized instructor. The other instrument time is just instrument time. So yeah, under the hood with a safety pilot would count. So you could go out and practice with somebody. So if you're trying to, like, maybe be efficient, you go out maybe with somebody else who's working on it, or just willing to be a safety pilot, and that way you could practice whatever you've been learning, whether it's holds and everything. But I cannot, I don't want it to in any way say that you shouldn't be taking advantage of an instructor, because they're going to have that feedback to give you that somebody else may not,
Mm,
because that's what they've trained for, and they're going to be able to give you the tips and evaluate. Especially, like, if you're going out with someone that's not an instrument pilot, they're not going to know that if you did it correctly or not. I can remember being a safety pilot before I did my instrument rating. I was just kind of like looking around, going, like, watching for traffic. I had no idea if they did it well or not. So you're missing out on that feedback part.
Makes sense. Okay. Some of these questions got more into the VOR stuff. Like, I guess the person asked, what is the future outlook for VOR aids? And also,
Um,
are VOR checks still required if you're only using GPS?
Well, if you, that's a good question on the VOR, because you notice I mentioned on the approach chart here, it's like you have to do, your VORs need to be checked within 30 days under 91-171 of using the VORs. That is a good question. So that, now, honestly, what that does is, that's one I'd have to do some research on, because that comes back around to, is that if your airplane has the VOR and it's IFR certified, is it required for it to be 30, like, current in a 30-day check for you to fly, or is it okay to fly without it? So I'd have to research that one. I don't know that one off the top of my head. What was the other part of that question, Stephen?
Oh, shucks.
You missed it. Okay, it was
Yeah.
along those lines. I think they asked about the future of VORs. So
Yeah,
we
yeah,
know that the FAA is still maintaining the idea of the MON, the minimum operational network. They have a plan so that if GPS, something were to happen, that we're going to have a VOR somewhere, within range for us to then use it. I'm guessing we may not get down to the airport we wanted to get to, but we'll get down if that were to happen. Of course, the chances of that are probably pretty small, but like I said, the VOR is not a backup if you don't know how to use it, which is why I'm so sort of passionate about, like, learn how to use the VOR, and the same skills that you use with the VOR, you can use with the GPS. Because
Yeah.
learning that stuff I talked about with orientation, you can totally do that with the GPS. You can use the GPS as a VOR when you just put it on OBS mode or hold mode.
Yeah. I remember you going over some of the VOR stuff with me. I struggle with it too. It was like just wrapping the head around it. I understand laying it on a flat plane and how it's supposed to work, but yeah.
So the thing I would say there too is, I know we've talked about this too, Stephen, is that it's practice. You just got to make sure you're practicing with it. That simulator that I mentioned, that FlyGo thing, is huge. Unfortunately, it is iPad only. There may be other ones on the internet and so on. I put a link to a one that's it generates holds for you, just so you can practice doing your holding. But that FlyGo simulator is amazing for that stuff. Also, for folks out there, I saw people asking about, is a desktop flight sim useful? Absolutely, it's useful. In fact, they even have courses on some of those. I know X-Plane, Microsoft Flight Sim, there are the communities out there online that you can get your instrument rating, virtually, not the FAA one, but one to fly in the simulators. They teach you how to do that too. So majorly, the only thing I would say is that really take advantage of an FAA, a CF, what people call a double I, or an instrument instructor, just because they're going to make sure they teach you the good habits so you don't develop bad ones.
Okay. Yeah. Lance had asked earlier, on a glass panel, that he always has difficulty finding the standard rate turn demarcations as opposed to a steam gauge. It never really seems intuitive. Asking if you could point out where those are.
Man, so it is, I believe it's these marks right here. And in fact, in the FAA book, here, let me find that really quick because it shows all of that. So that's free online. I know Rod's book's got it too, which I always recommend because I love Rod's stuff. But in the FAA book, I'm going to try to find you a page here because you can go look this up right now and download it. It's in chapter 2. Let's see if I can find you the page. It will show that. At least I thought it was chapter. Is this the right one? Yeah, Instrument Flying Handbook. I was doing this last night. Oh, it's a different. It's in the current one. Yeah. It is. It's in chapter 2. I must have an older version printed out here. But it shows you all those things with the glass panel. I'm just trying to find that graphic. If I can, there it is, turn rate indicator. So it shows a graphic like this. It's probably going to be hard to see, but it looks like that. Go check it out. I believe it's in chapter 2 of the Instrument Flying Handbook, and it shows you little depictions of that, and that way you'll see what it looks like. The other part is, if for some reason your display has some slightly different format, check the little manual for it, and it'll explain to you too. The thing I would tell you is, with glass panel, I had the same issue. For me, the biggest factor was that the tapes, because of those numbers, I drove myself nuts. Like, I got to be at 100 knots, not 102. You just have to accept the fact that it's like, or the TAC, it's 2312 and it's supposed to be at 2300. On the analog gauges, that's what it's really doing. It just doesn't, we just don't notice those fine differences. So give yourself a break. If you're at 4,010 feet and that's where everything's stabilized, it's okay. You just got to give yourself a break. Because
a little fluctuation.
Yeah, there's always going to be little fluctuations and stuff. So it's like, it's not that you can't shoot for that 4,000, but don't drive yourself insane, because then you'll have fixating and you'll have problems. So what I would say for the turn coordinator part too is, it's all about the rate of turn. It's just learning it, and then you'll get the hang of it. You just got to practice with it. There are simulators for I know the iPad. I'm sure it's for Android as well, and then the flight sims you can practice on your computer or your tablet as well.
Yeah.
Just get used to it.
I like this one. It's kind of more of an opinion thing, but someone was asking if the like synthetic vision or highway in the sky boxes might eventually become primary for IFR flights, like en route and down runway. Kind of like the way VFR replaces blast predecessor. Like, is that a thing?
Yeah, it's certainly. Yeah, I've heard of it. In fact, I remember reading about that in the 90s when I was doing my training. In the Jeppesen books, it had this depictions of that. Is that coming in the future? I think I would be irresponsible to say that no, that might not happen. I think it's, I think it's certainly possible. Is it happening right now? No, not yet. But I could certainly see that as a future. By the way, somebody found it out. Who is it for me? I just saw in the comments. See, I know our audience is awesome. It was Ed that said that 91171, the VOR check only applies if you're using it, the VOR, if you're under IFR, using that as your radio navigation. So it sounds like if it wasn't current and you're using GPS as your primary nav, it sounds like you would be okay there. But again, if you want to absolutely 100% double check, give us a call at AOPA here.
Oh, we had some questions there as you were showing some charts about the final lining up with, or not lining up with the runways. I don't know if the picture showed it wasn't quite lined up. Some folks were
Yes.
asking about that.
Okay, that would be, I know exactly what they're talking about.
And then, yeah, why would IFR approach not bring you straight into the runway?
Because it depends on, in this case, it depends on where that VOR is situated in relation to the runway. So in this case, this is a ground station. So if you're doing GPS, well, two things, and also it could be because of terrain. So, so with a GPS approach, most of the time that final approach segment is going to be lined up, unless there was a terrain issue. Maybe there's a mountain there, and they're bringing you in on a course that allows you to get into that airport, but they couldn't get you down low enough because there's terrain too close by, and so they angle it. Trust me, I have flown this approach at Carroll County plenty of times. This is not that big of a deal. If it gets too far off, you'll be able to tell because it'll say something like VOR alpha. And so that lets you know that it is not lined up with that runway. This is, and I forget the degrees, it's like within 30 degrees or something. There's a reg and it's in there. But if it's within a certain amount, then they're still going to use that runway number. Most of the time they're straight. ILS is typically straight. The GPS approaches, normally you're going to be straight into the runway, but this is also can be used, I didn't get into the details, but can be used as a circling approach. So I could fly in here and maybe the wind is favoring runway 16. So I would break off, fly my pattern and come in and land on runway 16. So, you know, it's sort of, and then it's irrelevant. You'll see somewhere approaches come in, I'm using the mouse here to show that, like at a perpendicular angle, and then you would break off and circle around to the runway that the wind is favoring. So yeah, that's not really an issue. It's just, it's based on when they were certifying it. And I'm sure in the case here, it's because that's where the VOR is situated on the ground.
That makes sense. Okay. So we got
By the
about 5
way,
minutes
let
left
me
here.
throw out there too, yeah, for folks, because I see comments and stuff. If there's more of this you want me to do, please let me know. It's like I can dig into other topics and stuff. It's like I just picked out what I thought would be useful. But if there's more you guys want to know, just tell us. So go ahead.
Goodness. How about this? There was a question like, what is the best practice for doing a DME hold? Should they create a user waypoint or set up a
Man,
GPS
yeah,
hold?
yeah. That would be
Does it
hard for me to
autopilot
answer
do it?
just that quickly. DME, I love DME arcs. DME hold. Actually, sorry, DME. I thought I was thinking arcs because I love doing arcs. They're fun. Of course, now with GPS, they're really easy. But so DME hold. So say that. Read the question again because I was thinking arcs. I was getting all excited.
What is the best practice for doing a DME hold? Should they create a user waypoint, set GPS hold, or let the autopilot do its thing? Or do it manually?
Yeah. I'm always one that I want to be able to fly everything manually. I've come across folks in the past where it's like they come to me and they want to do some review or whatever, and that all they've been doing is flying their autopilot. And so, of course, for an IPC or something, I want to see, can you fly it manually? Because it's like, I know you can handle the autopilot, and then they're a disaster. And what are you going to do if that autopilot fails? So I'm not in any means saying autopilots are no good. Autopilots are awesome. They're a great device. They can help keep you safe, but make sure you practice your hand flying. Now, when it comes to the DME, I'm assuming we're using I have a lot of airplanes, I'm guessing now, as they get upgraded to having a GPS, that DME unit is probably going to get removed just because it's older. And the GPS is way more flexible in terms of you can set that off of any waypoint. So I would probably use the GPS is an official replacement for the DME when it comes to things like doing holds and that sort of stuff. So I would probably just set that waypoint in. That if I'm doing a hold, I set it in my GPS, set that waypoint. I would probably just use the GPS as my primary nav for the holds because it's honestly easier than doing the VOR. Practice with the VOR too, though, and then what you do is you can put you set it up in the GPS, you put in the VOR that you're using, so you have that distance information and put it in the OBS mode, but then also practice navigating your primary nav with the VOR just so you get used to its idiosyncrasies, because the GPS tends to be steady, and then it's a lot smoother. The VOR, sometimes that needle will do little swingy things, and it's good to practice with it again, just as a backup. But yeah, if I'm flying an actual and I've got the choice, the GPS is way easier, and that's what I'm going to use.
Okay. I guess we're almost done with our time, but I got one last one that's popped up. Mr. was saying he loves being instrument rated, but the hardest part staying current. Instructors are busy and scarce around where he's living, and doesn't know many pilots. Any suggestions on how to stay current?
Simulator. So go find a sim. Hopefully one of the schools or somebody nearby has one that you can use, because remember, you can stay current using the simulator. So I would do a combination of two things. One, I would use a simulator because you can use that. So that counts for you being under the hood. That counts for your approaches. So you can maintain currency that way and proficiency, more importantly. And then if you want to maintain that proficiency in the airplane, if you don't have someone that can fly with you as safety pilot, you can then go fly just practicing your procedures, but do them visually. So you're kind of doing your scan inside and out while you're flying in the airplane so you can keep your airplane proficiency skills up. But for use a sim because you don't have to have an instructor with you. As long as you're current or you're within that currency window, you don't need to have an instructor with you. And so there's no reason now not to stay current if you have access to a simulator. And of course, it's really cost effective.
Okay.
All right. So
Yeah.
I guess that brings us to the end. Let me go back to that last slide again really quick. Really appreciate you folks sticking around. We had a great audience for this one.
Yeah.
I know I saw over 1,000 folks on this, so that's amazing. So like I said, if there's more you would like me to talk about or us to talk about in general, let me see if I can skip past you. Let's see. I'll just pick the slide here.
So as I mentioned, like where they can send suggestions, questions. If you want copies of the slide deck or the handout, just contact us both at the ftinitiative@aopa.org inbox. We'll be able to get stuff answered that way. And absolutely would love suggestions for future topics. If you want more instrument or other things, let us know.
There you go, right there. Contact ftinitiative@aopa.org. And that brings us to the close of another What's Up. So happy you're here. Please join us again April 17th. Make sure at least a week before that you submit your questions via that link, and it will also go out in the marketing. And with that, for Stephen and Chris and everybody else here at AOPA, we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Fly safe, guys.
Yeah. Yep, I'll have a reminder on that link in the reminder emails that go out to everybody who's already registered. So you look for those in a week or so.
All right, cool.
All right,
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.